Thank you. David's touched on this question in his last response, but I wonder what the panel's opinion is of this. In the last recession, we saw a large number of construction business failures on the way out of the recession. So while the economy appeared to be improving, do we understand why this happened, and are we ready to deal with a repeat of this in the future?
Andrew Jarvis, are you concerned that we may lose some construction businesses during the recession, or should we feel comfortable with some degree of consolidation in the supply systems?
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? I'm sorry, I'm a local government officer, and I have some private business experience, but many years ago. So this is from where I see it, not practical experience.
Absolutely.
But why should that be? I mean, I've got businesses now who are going into receivership as we go into the recession. For various reasons. They're not all the same, and it's difficult to find a model for it. But we're talking about coming out the other end when life should be rosy. You know, we should be looking into the blue yonder with lots of work and lots of money coming through and everything else. And then suddenly we find businesses are going to the wall as well. I think it's probably because the businesses have actually successfully downsized themselves to deal with the recession. They have got strategies in place to enable them to survive during that period. But part of that, the consequence of that, is that there is a reduction in the skill base. There is a reduction in the finance which is available. There is a reduction in all sorts of things which are around the supply chain, the material chain, the materials in the supply chains and so on have all contracted. And then if we come out of the recession, we suddenly find that there is finance available, but there is always a lag between the finance, the money and the will being available to do things, and the resources being available to meet that demand. So a contractor, he's been struggling for 2 or 3 years, and I think as far as the current recession is concerned, it may go on a bit beyond there, but let's say 2 or 3 years, suddenly finds he's getting lots of requests for work. His first temptation is to put his prices in at the level which he's had to be putting them in for the period during the recession. He's successful because there's greater demand. He then finds perhaps that there isn't the skills base within his organisation, or he can't buy them in because they're not there. He has difficulty getting materials. The material suppliers suddenly find there is greater demand for their materials, and so you start getting inflation. And at that point, I think, is the danger, where the costs for that supply have gone up, but actually he has been pricing and his mindset is still in the recession. And at that point, there is a real danger that he's suddenly going to find his cash flows are not equal, his costs are higher than his income, and that's the danger point, I think. Now, how do we deal with it? Well, I'm not a businessman, so I'm not going to try and tell you how to run your businesses, but I suggest that it's planning. Is trying to plan your workload and make sure you've got an even spread of workload, and you are actually planning for that expansion which comes during the period out of recession. And I leave it to others who are far more expert than me to deal with that.
Shall we go straight to the audience on this one? Anyone in the audience got some ideas they'd like to share with us? Or points they'd like to raise? Okay, David, do you want to? Oh, sorry. Okay. Yes, sorry, right at the back. Yeah.
Yeah, Richard Thurlow from Interserve, main contractor. Just picking up that point, would the subcontractors also have a mindset established from the recession and also hold their prices? You seem to be suggesting that the prime contractors would have that recessionary mindset and hold their prices down, whilst there would be inflationary pressure. As we came out of the recession, there would be inflationary pressure from below. And I'm just wondering, wouldn't it be the case that mindset would permeate the whole of the hierarchy?
Yes, it may well be. You know, but it's the whole of the supply chain, isn't it? And if that doesn't work together, wherever the weakest point is, that's going to fall first, and that's going to cause problems elsewhere within the supply chain. I suppose the one person who hasn't impacted by it is the client, who is saying, jolly good, I'm still getting good prices. But, you know, eventually, if his supply chain disappears or goes into recession, goes into receivership, then he's going to be in problems as well.
David,
I think the I think the answer to that very good question from the back is twofold. First of all, it depends what the shape of the exit out of the recession is. The Bank of England is talking about a V-shaped recession. And some people in the IMF are talking in Britain about it being much a smoothed out and slower emergence. And I think it'll depend how abruptly that comes. That was certainly the case in the last recession, when things went out very quickly. And the second part of that is going back to, I think it was, the gentleman there that was talking about the private side of his business and colleagues being asked for 40%. I think it was you, sir, talking about a 40% reduction. Now, it depends, I think, to what extent the supply side of the industry, and that's obviously design, main contractor, subcontractors and so on, suppliers. I think it very much depends on how much cohesion, professional cohesion and business cohesion there is, first of all to each other, to the supply and to their own business plans. If, as in the 90s recession, everything gets split and it's everyone, I mean, that kind of Thatcherite era, everyone for himself, and therefore they were driven down in price and they all acceded to that and said, okay, if that's how it is, I'll go down 40%. I sense now there'll be more reluctance to do that. There has already been some consolidation in the industry. There's more foreign involvement, both ways. Us working overseas, and look how many designers have gone overseas because of the recession. They've gone to where there is more work and they can come back. So I think there's that. There are less companies around now than there were in the 90s. So it'll depend how much cohesion. If all the people that deal with you or whoever you're quoting say, okay, I'll lie back and let my tummy tickle and I'll do it for 40% less, then all is lost.
I need to move on. Can I ask Dominic if he wants to come back on as the original questioner?
I think that's very, very good. I think there is evidence that we've learned really from the last recession, and it's heartening.
Is there anything you want to add quickly to that, Bob?
Well, it's just that I think the two answers you covered off the cause and the overall effect and how we address it. I think from a very local and micro scale, in terms of what we're doing in ASDA, we have very, very competitive pay regime anyway. Again, we've copied that from our trading colleagues downstairs because it's all about risk aversion for us. Our repeat business cannot go with a major supplier failing, because it has a catastrophic effect in terms of our overall delivery. And therefore we have a risk register where we ask our subcontractors for feedback. We have an open phone line, etc., and they give us that feedback about where that payment is, or is that payment held up with our main contractors, etc. And we genuinely help the main contractors, and help is a broader word than I'm using now, help the main contractors realise that they've got to move that payment on quickly. Because failure is not an option for a large retailer, I would suggest.
Una, do you want to
Sorry,
answer?
it's just a small point. I think what's really critical, isn't it, is about keeping those skills, and wherever possible, if the contractors can keep those skills in house, because once you've lost them, you've lost them. And we have to sort of bear some hope, I suppose, about this fiscal stimulus that may or may not be coming. And certainly from our sector, we're putting a lot of lobbying into trying to get a significant increase in the amount of funding that comes into social housing. I suspect education and hospitals and everyone else is doing the same. But if we can keep those skills going, if we can keep those public sector projects, keeping people in work over the next few years, and hopefully we'll be in a fitter state. And I think there is a real opportunity, because I think that it feels like we're still very much at the beginning in terms of learning how to build properly for sustainability, certainly in the residential sector anyway. And I think there's an awful lot more we can do about gearing up for those skills so that we are fit for purpose when we come out of this. That we've got the skills. We're not there yet, certainly in terms of house building, to do it with the economies of scale and the maintainability particularly. So let's hope that fiscal stimulus does come our way.
Okay. We've got to move on now because time's of the essence. I'd like to move to our next question, which is from Ron Willers of the Federation of Master Builders.